Okay, we're going to move on very quickly now. Whoops, to the panel discussion. We've got about a quarter of an hour, and to join in with that, as you probably noticed, we have two more very special guests. First of all, Caroline Waters, who's the Director of People and Policy at BT, and Merlin Cohen, who's the Director of Comms for Northern Europe for Unilever. Okay, so welcome both, and I'm going to throw this open to the floor then. Future work. What questions do you have for the panel, for Alison, Peter, or any of the other panellists? Okay, there's a gentleman at the back there. I'm slightly dazzled by the light, if you turn that down.
Gregory from ProxyClick. I just have a question for Mark. You spoke about the impact of the move from one office to the other. You didn't mention the environmental impact. Was there anything calculated, the overall impact on CO2 emission, etc.?
To be honest, we forgot about that in 2008. And in 2010, we started a project, a sustainability project, where we try to speed up with environmental sustainability. And we did some change interventions. We got rid of some of the refrigerators. We got some light switches that were economically. We went to a new energy company, all kinds of things like that, yeah. Yeah, so to be honest, we forgot about it, but later on we catched up.
Okay, there's a gentleman down here at the front. Do you have a question?
Mark, hi. Fascinating project you've done there. The quadrant on the bottom right-hand side talking about productivity. Can you elaborate a bit more? How did you measure that? What's behind the 49%, the 10%?
Several things. We hired the Rotterdam School of Management to measure the productivity. But of course, productivity for knowledge workers is very hard to measure. So the way we measure it is by asking people, do you think you work more productive than you used to in the old situation? And well, if you have a critical employee base, then half of it will say, yes, we are. And half of it will say, well, actually, I'm not so fond of the new way of working and I don't see any productivity improvement at all. But if we as Microsoft measured it ourselves, no one would believe us. It would be a marketing and sales story. So therefore, I think in our case, a success factor was that we combined the investigation with the Rotterdam School of Management.
Okay, that's quite an interesting question. Can I just open that one up to the panel at large? How do we measure the productivity of levels, the increased productivity, I should say, brought about by agile working practices? Caroline, could you tell us how BT does that?
We've got a great deal of experience in this because we've been doing it for years. And it all started with actually the shift to really understanding that the way to measure people's productivity is based on their output. When you get to being really clear about what outputs are, then it becomes quite easy to measure it. So even with knowledge workers, you can even measure whether there's an increase in creativity just by looking at things like new ideas developed, shorter time to market. You can measure pretty well everything if you're clear about the output. So we developed key performance indicators for each of our lines of business, and within those lines of business there are some very specific and easy to measure things, there are some harder to measure things, but we worked at getting those right. We took measurements before, during and after flexible working trials, especially the very early ones back in the 1960s. And in 1980 and 98, we did a big study. We took a slightly different approach in that what we did was we went to the universities and said, here's our measurement set. Do you think that will give an outcome that would stand up and be demonstrable? They said yes, so we went away and did it. We made it part of what every line manager should be doing. And we can show all sorts of things like 20-odd% productivity increase in all home-based workers, and then you start to get interested, don't you? So you start to measure things like sick absence reductions, improve mental well-being, all of those things. So I think this is actually quite easy as long as you know what your business does, and I assume most of you do.
Merlin, could you give us a Unilever perspective on that?
Yeah, well, I'm based in Hamburg, and we changed also building in 2009, and based on that, basically implemented a program which is globally implemented by Unilever, which is called Agile Working. And when we changed into the new building, and I think, you know, measurement of performance or other points of view, our CEO, when he opened the building, so you have an atrium in the middle, and we had all 1,200 employees basically gathered there. And he said he never seen so many happy Germans in one place. And I think that's, you know, a very easy way to put it in that way, how things can change if you start to go away from input-oriented to output-oriented, if you give people the flexibility. But you have to give them guidance, because they're scared. I mean, we were talking about fear earlier this morning, and people are scared if you don't give them guidance. You say, oh, yeah, well, you know, you can work whenever you want. People get scared. So you have to give them guidance and leadership. And one of the things that we did, for example, in Germany was that we introduced the 1 meter rule. That was introduced by our chairman, and he said, basically, I have to take, you know, 3 or 4 very difficult decisions every day, but everybody else has to take, you know, themselves many decisions. And the thing that really happened is say, okay, if you think that you can make the decision yourself, don't escalate it up and down, but just do it. And we trust you that you can do it. And that made the people extremely confident, because they suddenly get the awareness about what is their contribution to the business. And this is a big change that has taken place. And beyond that, the same thing that we had as Microsoft, we changed to a new building, which was elected the best office building in the world by leading architects in Barcelona in 2009. And if you Google Hamburg and Unilever, then you will see the house. And it's open and transparent. And suddenly the change was away from sitting in your own box to about 1,500 to 2,500 external visitors, just consumers coming into the house. And suddenly you had the contact with the boss, and the boss for Unilever is the consumer in the end. And that has changed, and those kind of things is the future of working, away from your little box, open to communication, transparency, and it's a change process that you have to help people with, because otherwise they get scared at the beginning, and it's something new. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Merlin. Can we have another question from the audience? Gentleman here, please.
Jason Turner from Swanky Hagen Connell Architects. It's a question for Alison and Peter, just going back to your proposition about how businesses need to start getting with the change. And I just wondered if you had any views on what kind of organisations or types of organisations are best positioned to help these companies make that change. Is it management consultants? Is it workplace consultants? Is it architects and designers, or is it a blend?
It's obviously enlightened architects.
Right answer.
No, I think it's interesting. There's a number of people in the room. When it was asked this morning, are there any HR people in the room? Nobody held their hands up. But if I ask the question, how many people here are workplace consultants, who would hold their hand up? Number of people, including people who are architects by training, some people facilities people by training, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're doing the job correctly, then it is you guys, because you're taking into account the technology, the people, the things that go into the whole equation. What we're pleading for in the book is for that to happen more generally, because you get a lot of HR consultants who will go in and put in the personnel policies or make the change, or you look at the culture change but don't understand the technology or the benefits that can come from more efficient use of space. Likewise, you get workplace design people who don't understand the human issues and so on. So it's a plea for maybe it's a new profession, the workplace guru or something, who can pull together those different disciplines.
Okay, anybody else have anything to add to that from the panel?
Yeah.
Caroline?
I think we're starting already to look at the whole issue of the future by looking back to what we've always done before. So for me, the one thing that is consistent through history is that what the starting place is actually the task. So, when we were an agricultural nature, we built farms and barns. When we were a manufacturing nation, we built factories. Then we went to office workers, so we built offices. The real thing we need are the people who can anticipate and understand what the work we will be doing is. Then what we need is the space that allows to optimise the human impact of working on that. So, you know, when we designed, made the change around BT, what we tried to do was talk to our people and say, okay, what's going to make it easier and better for you? And what they said to us is, actually, because we all have such very complex and varied roles now, there actually isn't one type of space that is right for me at every part of my job or every part of my day. So what I want is spaces where I can find the optimum space for me to work in. So that's not just meeting rooms, but fabulous meeting rooms that I may use in different ways. It's a space where I can have meetings and sometimes private meetings, so that every time I have a task, I can find the right kind of space. And I think that's where we need to be actually starting from, is what is the nature of the task that we're going to perform, and then understanding what that means. And then I think moving away from the concept of it being a space owned by a corporation, because I'm not actually convinced that that's what it's going to be about. So design should be much more about trying to create spaces, not in industrial areas, but where people live, where they will be happy to go, so that they can actually work effectively, and we cut out all the journeys. So I'd love to hear you saying you're working with the construction industry, you're working with the planning associations, trying to envisage that. I don't think it's really about starting with the fixed state, if you like.
Okay, very good. I think we heard Philip Voss talking about that earlier on in the day, didn't we, about adapting office spaces, rethinking them so to fit in with a new, more flexible, agile form of working. Okay, we have another question from the audience. Lady in the middle there.
Hello, Elizabeth Marsh from Internet Benchmarking Forum. Sorry, I feel greedy because it's my third question today, but I couldn't resist. A question for Mark, Caroline and Merlin, really. And we've heard about your brilliant examples of implementing agile working. I was just wondering about things that you've tried that haven't worked, and what to organisations embarking on that journey, what are the learnings from those things?
Well, I can start maybe. I think the most important thing that I already pointed out just before is you have to take people along the journey. It is the collaboration. She was already talking about that before. You have to have the collaboration with people. You have to integrate them in a way in the process of the change. And I think this is the biggest learning that we've had, in the sense is really you take the people along in this situation. And as they point out in their book, there's 25 factors that you can measure. So it is just such a huge amount of things that you have to think of. And it's easy just, to focus on one specific thing only and to forget the others. And this co-creation has been, I think, the most important secret of the success that we've had in this change process. Or this is a continuous process. It's never ending in that sense. And I think for people really to believe, it's hearing it and then believing it, and then basically transporting it themselves and being the ambassadors of this change culture in the end. And I think this is this you only can do if you incorporate the people in as part of this change process. Otherwise, they don't believe it. It's just top down, and that is something they get enough information top down anyhow. Yeah.
I think for me, there's probably three really simple things. Don't underestimate the power of inertia. People are really happy to moan about how awful their workspace is, but actually doing something about it and changing it is also a bit not really what they want to do. They love the end outcome, but the transition is all a bit of a pain, really. So it's important to think about really good quality comms and really good quality support during that period. And I don't think we got that right early enough, because we'd involved employees. We thought they were all just going to go, yippee, you've listened to us, let's all go for it. And I don't think we paid enough attention to that right at the beginning. The other thing is, don't have HR roll it out. You know, I think, you know, as a HR person, I can say that, particularly in my organisation, which is very task-focused, very objectives and output-based. One converted line manager's worth more than 10 suits from HR when you're actually trying to get something going, get that healthy competition on numbers and stuff. You know, that's really helpful. And the other thing is, you know, what the boss does gets copied. So you've got to get your early role models amongst not necessarily the most senior people in the business, but the people who are liked and the people who are maybe not liked, but are seen to be going places. If you get some good examples amongst them, the organisation will move.
Okay, anyone else? Peter, do you have anything to add to that?
Can
Okay.
Can I maybe just
yeah,
give you one example, or picking up on that one, because it just shows how this works with leadership in that sense. Our chairman, Harry Brouwer, in Germany, basically when we changed into the new building, was getting himself. It's very open. The building and the meeting points can be seen from everywhere. It's not a coffee corner or something like that, but really open and transparent. And we were in the new building for 2 weeks, and a woman who's been with Unilever for 25 years came up to him and said, "Mr. Brouwer, can I ask you a question?" He said, "Yeah, of course." He said, "Mr. Brouwer, I want to tell you one thing, and that is, I've seen you more often in the last 2 weeks than the management in the last 25 years. And it just says everything about the changing culture that suddenly happens. If the leader shows himself and is open and transparent and just says, not only we have to be open and transparent, it's leadership that really changes everything.
There is one. I mean, our book is full of some stories about a lot of organisations in transition to future work. But there also are some horror stories about sort of the things that can go wrong as well. I mean, one of them actually was in a very large global technology company, and it's about leadership and the importance, but also sort of building in this new attitude and new culture and making it ingrained in the organisation, so it doesn't just go away when a new boss comes in and decides that he wants everybody to be in the office, because that's what happened in this case. And these people were working around the clock. They were actually fielding calls during the night, so they had set up a way of working from home so that they could do that. And they didn't really go into the office very much during the day because there wasn't an awful lot for them to do, because it's a global organisation, so they're working in different time zones. And then one day a new boss came and said, I want everybody to be in the office. I want to see you all, and we need to have to be a team. And to be a team, we need to be all together. So as he said, when you're on call 24/7, and you're required to be in the office for no productive reason, that's when insanity occurs.
Okay, we've got time for one more question, or maybe two. Okay, let's start with the gentleman at the back there. Yeah.
Thank you. Nigel Osland, Workplace Unlimited, and it's a related question to Nigel Osland, Workplace Unlimited.
Thanks, Nigel.
And it's a limited question to what you just related to what you just said, Alison, and Peter brought it up as well. This barrier, one of the barriers being the management and the attitude to presenteeism and managing by presenteeism. But I've kind of got some sympathy for them, because I think it's a great British tradition that once we get competent at our profession, we're told to go and manage. And we're not necessarily taught how to manage. We basically mimic our bosses and how they managed. And I think that's a big gap, is that we're kind of coming in as property experts and saying, right, you're doing that all wrong. People don't need to be in the office, so you've got to completely relearn how to manage, not that you were taught anyway in the first place. And I'm just wondering, who are the experts, maybe it's the workplace consultants again, but who are the experts that teach managers how to manage in this new world?
He's one of them.
That's probably where the good HR consultants come in, because they recognise this is a change management process, and like all good change management process, it needs to be managed effectively from beginning through to end, taking along the people with you, and critically in this case, as we've already heard, taking the senior management with you, because if they pay lip service to it but don't actually enact it out themselves, then it's just a hollow change, and it won't really happen. So good change management consultants, good strategic HR consultants who can engage with the senior managers, the directors, and talk business results, as well as the kind of HR benefits, such as lower turnover, access to a wider pool of labour, reduction of absenteeism and those kind of things. We can also say, and by the way, this will impact your bottom line. You won't just save a few pounds here and there on your real estate costs. You will potentially, if you can increase, I mean, there's Caroline saying maybe things as much as a 20% increase in productivity. One survey that I did that's in the book looked at home workers versus office workers. 50% of the sample said they could measure their output, and of those, 25% said they were 50% or more productive. There's a lot of percentages in there, but effectively a quarter of that group saying that they got half as much work again done when they were working from home. Okay, that's self-reported, but even if you cut that in half, if people are 20 to 25% more productive, go to the finance director and tell them that, and they're all going to be very interested. So getting somebody who can put the business case to senior management is an important part.
Okay. I think, just very quickly, I think we're missing the point here, because the real point is that you no longer have to manage the people. That's the real thing. If you have true flexibility, what you're doing is you're managing the outputs, and you're working with the people to make sure there aren't any barriers in the way. So it's, management is a relatively new concept. It suddenly appeared around the time of the Second World War. It doesn't have to stay with us forever. In fact, here's one person who's voting for it to go, because the real future is about helping individuals. It's not about managing them. And indulge me for a moment, audience. So can you all do this? Come on, I'm going to make you do it, okay? You can do this. Right. Now, what I want you to do is to put it on your chin, on your cheek. Okay? So what you've all done is you've all copied me. You haven't done what I've asked you to. And the real message there is that will be what happens in your workplace. So if you say you're trying to build a flexible working and agile working, whatever you want to call it, environment, which is based on trust, and then you say, oh dear me, but how am I going to manage you all? The mixed messages to your workforce are absolutely incredible, because really what you're saying is, I'm trusting you now. You go work when you need to work and do what you need to do, and the communication is about how do I help you. What I'd love to hear most, I think UK PLC will be its most effective when, let's call them managers for now, because we don't have a better phrase, managers, coaches, the first question they ask themselves every day is, how do I work? How do I make my colleagues happier and more productive? And that's really what we should be looking at. And my big complaint is, where the heck are all the management schools in this?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Good point to end on there. Future management, get rid of it. Excellent. Okay. Except the HR, obviously. So we've reached the time's up for this session, I'm afraid. Apologies to the gentleman who's waiting for the question. But can I thank very much for the fascinating insights, Mark Meerbeek, Caroline Waters, Alison Maitland, Peter Thompson and Merlin Cohen. Thank you very much.